As Dr. Ethan moved closer, his voice barely audible above a whisper, the gentle glow of the exam room's lights played across his face. As he felt her wrist and checked her pulse, he whispered, "Calm down. This place is safe for you." However, the way his gaze lingered on hers conveyed to her that she was more than just a patient. His palm settled lightly on her shoulder, sending goosebumps down her spine, causing her breath to catch. A part of her didn't want this to stop, even though she knew it wasn't natural. One of those doctors who made an impression was Dr. Ethan Hayes. Everywhere he went, his sweet, honeyed voice, neatly combed hair, and keen jawline made him the life of the party. But it wasn't just his looks. It was the way he made everyone feel seen, heard, and understood. For Leah, a young marketing professional battling persistent migraines, he had become more than just her physician. Her appointments with Dr. Hayes had begun as standard examinations, with his full attention to detail. However, as the weeks passed, their discussions became increasingly intimate. He inquired about her life, challenges, and aspirations. Even though he put on a show of professionalism, she couldn't help but wonder whether he saw her as more than just another case file, because of the spark or flicker of curiosity in his eyes. For Leah, it had been an especially difficult week. Her stress level had reached an all-time high, and the migraines were relentless. She didn't think twice when Dr. Hayes called to make an impromptu nighttime appointment. "I want to make sure we're on top of this," he had said, his tone gentle but firm. "Let's meet after hours so we can take our time." When Leah arrived at the clinic, the hallways were silent, the usual hum of activity replaced by an almost eerie stillness. She stepped into his office, where Dr. Rolf Hayes was waiting, his white coat unbuttoned and his sleeves rolled up. "Leah," he said, smiling warmly as he motioned for her to sit. "I'm glad you came." She returned the smile, though her heart was racing. "Thank you for fitting me in." "Always," he replied, his voice low and reassuring. As they spoke about her symptoms, his gaze never left hers. There was an intensity in his eyes that made her feel both vulnerable and exhilarated. He moved to her side, gently tilting her head to examine her neck and shoulders. "You're holding a lot of tension here," he noted, his fingers pressing lightly against her skin. Leah's breath hitched as his touch lingered a second too long. "I guess that's the stress," she murmured, her voice barely audible. His lips curved into a small smile. "Stress can do that," he said, his tone carrying an edge of something deeper. As the session continued, the line between professional and personal began to blur. Dr. Hayes's questions drifted from her migraines to her personal life, her hobbies, her relationships, her fears. And when she hesitated, he leaned in closer, his voice soft and coaxing. "You can tell me anything, Leah. I'm here for you." Her heart pounded in her chest as she opened up, sharing stories she hadn't told anyone in years. The way he listened, his eyes never leaving hers, made her feel seen in a way she hadn't in a long time. When he moved to massage the tension out of her shoulders, her pulse quickened. His hands were strong yet gentle, his touch sending waves of warmth through her body. "Does that feel okay?" he asked, his voice low and soothing. "More than okay," she admitted, her cheeks flushing. The air in the room grew heavy as the minutes ticked by. Leah could feel her resolve slipping, the rational part of her mind drowned out by the electricity crackling between them. When his hands moved lower, grazing the small of her back, she gasped softly. "Leah?" he murmured, his voice trembling slightly. "We shouldn't." She turned to face him, her eyes searching his. "But do you want to stop?" His silence was answer enough. Slowly, he leaned closer, his breath warm against her cheek. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Instead, she closed the distance between them, their lips meeting in a kiss that was hesitant at first, but quickly deepened. His hands slid to her waist, pulling her closer as the floodgates opened. Dr. Hayes lifted her effortlessly onto the examination table, his touch growing bolder with each passing moment. Leah's fingers tangled in his hair as their kisses grew more fervent, the tension that had been building for weeks finally erupting. "You're incredible," he murmured against her lips, his voice filled with reverence. "So are you," she whispered back, her hands exploring the contours of his chest. The sterile office seemed to fade away as they lost themselves in each other, their connection raw and unrestrained. Every kiss, every touch felt like a revelation, a moment of pure, unfiltered truth. As their passion reached its peak, a faint knock sounded at the door. Both froze, their breaths ragged. "Dr. Hayes?" a voice called from the hallway. "It's Sarah? I forgot my keys. Can you let me in?" Panic flickered in his eyes as he helped Leah down from the table. Their movements hurried, but silent. He adjusted his clothes, motioning for her to hide behind the curtain separating the examination area from his desk. The door opened, and a young nurse stepped inside, her expression apologetic. "Sorry to bother you," she said, holding up her keyring. "I didn't mean to interrupt anything." Dr. Hayes smiled tightly. "It's fine. Have a good night, Sarah." As the door clicked shut behind her, Leah stepped out from behind the curtain, but her heart still racing. "That was close," she said, her voice a mix of adrenaline and exhilaration. Dr. Hayes crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms. "Too close," he murmured, his lips brushing hers. "But it was worth every second." And as they locked the door behind them, Leah knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something far more dangerous and thrilling than she had ever imagined. Leah's head spun as she leaned against the exam room door, her heart still pounding from the intensity of the moment. Dr. Hayes stood before her, his sleeves rolled up and his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. Their connection felt undeniable, but the lingering knock of reality still echoed in the back of her mind. "This isn't just a risk," she said softly, her voice trembling as she tried to steady herself. "This could ruin us." Dr. Hayes closed the distance between them, his hands finding her waist. His touch was grounding, yet it set her skin ablaze. "I know," he admitted, his voice filled with a mix of passion and regret, "but I can't stay away from you, Leah. I've tried, and I've failed." The confession sent a shiver down her spine. She searched his face for any sign of doubt, but found none. "What if someone finds out?" she whispered, her hands resting lightly on his chest. "What if Sarah says something?" His expression hardened. "She won't. I'll make sure of it, but I need to know. Are you all in? Because once we cross this line again, there's no turning back." Leah hesitated, her heart racing as she considered his words. Every logical part of her screamed to walk away, to leave before things spiraled further out of control. But the fire in his eyes, the pull of his presence, was impossible to ignore. "I'm all in," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances, hushed conversations, and fleeting touches that left them both yearning for more. They met in secret, finding solace in the shadows of the clinic after hours. Every encounter was a gamble, a high-stakes game that left them both exhilarated and terrified. One evening, as the rain pattered softly against the windows, Leah found herself in his office once again. The room was dimly lit, the faint glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Dr. Hayes stood by the window, his hands in his pockets as he gazed out at the storm. "You know," he said without turning, "I used to think I had everything figured out. My career, my life, it was all mapped out." "And now?" Leah asked, stepping closer. He turned to face her, his expression soft but conflicted. "And now, everything feels different. You've changed everything, Leah." She closed the distance between them, her hand reaching up to touch his face. "You've changed me too," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. His lips found hers in a kiss that was both tender and desperate, as if he were trying to hold on to something fleeting. Their movements grew bolder, the intensity between them building with every touch. He lifted her onto the desk, his hands trailing along her thighs as their breaths mingled. But even as they lost themselves in the moment, the weight of their choices loomed heavy in the air. Every kiss, every touch, was a reminder of the boundaries they had crossed and the risks they were taking. The thrill of their secret affair began to fray at the edges as whispers started circulating around the clinic. Sarah, the nurse who had interrupted them that night, had grown suspicious. Her lingering glances and pointed questions left Leah on edge, her anxiety growing with each passing day. "We need to be more careful," Leah said one evening as they lay tangled together on the small couch in his office. "Sarah knows something. I can feel it." Dr. Hayes ran a hand through his hair, his expression tense. "I'll talk to her," he said. "I'll handle it." But his assurances did little to ease her mind. The guilt and fear began to creep in, overshadowing the passion that had once consumed them. Leah found herself questioning everything: her choices, their connection, and whether this was worth the price they were both bound to pay. One evening, as Leah arrived at the clinic for another late-night meeting, she noticed something strange. The lights in Dr. Hayes' office were on, but the door was slightly ajar. She hesitated, her pulse quickening as she stepped closer. Inside, she saw Sarah standing by his desk, her arms crossed, and her expression icy. "You think I don't see what's going on?" Sarah hissed. "You're risking everything, your career, your reputation. For her?" Dr. Hayes stood tall, his voice calm but firm. "This is none of your business, Sarah." "It became my business the moment you started putting the entire clinic at risk," she shot back. "If you don't end this, I will." Leah's stomach dropped as she backed away, her mind racing. She didn't wait to hear his response. Instead, she turned and fled, her heart pounding as tears blurred her vision. Later that night, Dr. Hayes found her sitting in her car, parked in the rain outside the clinic. He tapped on the window, his expression soft but determined. She rolled it down, the cold air biting at her skin. "Leah," he said, his voice pleading, "don't let this scare you away." "She's right," Leah whispered, her voice trembling. "We're risking everything. Maybe we've been fooling ourselves." "No," he said firmly, taking her hands in his. "What we have isn't a mistake. It's real. And I'll do whatever it takes to protect it. And you." As the rain fell around them, Leah felt the weight of their choices settle over her. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and risks. But as she looked into Dr. Hayes' eyes, she realized one thing. She wasn't ready to let him go. "Then we fight," she said softly, her resolve hardening. "Together." And as their lips met once more, sealing their unspoken vow, they knew the storm was only beginning, but they were willing to face it head-on, no matter the cost. Leah sat in her car, the rain tapping rhythmically against the windshield as Dr. Hayes' words echoed in her mind. What we have isn't a mistake. It's real. But as much as her heart ached for him, the risks felt insurmountable. She gripped the steering wheel tightly, preparing to leave it all behind. Suddenly, a sharp knock on the passenger side window startled her. She turned to see him standing there, his face drenched from the downpour, his eyes intense. Without waiting for her permission, he opened the door and slid into the seat beside her, bringing with him the scent of rain and the magnetic pull she couldn't resist. "Leah, don't do this," he said, his voice low and pleading. "Don't walk away." She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Ethan, this is impossible. Sarah knows. It's only a matter of time before everything falls apart." "Let it fall apart," he said fiercely, reaching for her hand. "I don't care about anything else but you. I'll deal with Sarah, the clinic, whatever it takes. But I can't lose you." His words sent a jolt through her, but before she could respond, he leaned in, his lips capturing hers in a kiss that was both desperate and intoxicating. The tension, the fear, the passion, it all erupted in a torrent of unrestrained need. The small confines of the car became their sanctuary as their hands explored each other with a fervor that bordered on reckless. Ethan's fingers traced the line of her jaw, his touch igniting a fire within her as their kiss deepened. Leah's hands moved to his shirt, gripping the damp fabric as she pulled him closer. "You're soaked," she whispered breathlessly, her voice trembling with both hesitation and desire. "Then warm me up," he murmured, his lips trailing along her neck, leaving a trail of heat in their wake. Leah let out a soft gasp as his hands slid to her waist, pulling her onto his lap. The steering wheel pressed against her back, but she didn't care. All that mattered was the way his touch made her feel. Alive, wanted, and completely consumed. As their passion reached a fever pitch, the sound of another car engine roared nearby. They froze, their breaths heavy. As headlights illuminated the interior of Leah's car, she turned her head sharply, her heart sinking as she recognized the figure stepping out of the other vehicle. It was Sarah. Ethan cursed under his breath, his hands still resting on Leah's hips. "Stay here," he said, his voice low and commanding. "I'll handle this." Leah slid back into her seat as Ethan stepped out of the car, his shirt clinging to his chest. Sarah stood a few feet away, her arms crossed, her expression a mix of fury and triumph. "This is what you've been doing?" Sarah hissed, her voice cutting through the rain. "Risking everything for her?" Ethan squared his shoulders, his tone unyielding. "This is none of your business, Sarah. It is when it jeopardizes the clinic and my career, she snapped. You think you can keep this quiet? People are already talking. Leah watched from the car, her heart pounding as the confrontation unfolded. But then, to her shock, Sarah's expression shifted, her anger giving way to something unexpected. A sly smile spread across her lips. You know, Sarah said, her voice softening, you're not the only one who's noticed how attractive Dr. Hayes is. Ethan's jaw tightened. What are you getting at? Sarah took a step closer, her gaze flicking to Leah before settling back on him. Maybe there's a way we can all get what we want, without anyone finding out. The implication hung heavy in the air, and Leah's breath caught in her throat. Ethan turned to glance at her, his eyes dark with a mix of shock and intrigue. Sarah, he said slowly, his voice laced with warning, this isn't the time. Think about it, Sarah interrupted, her tone dripping with suggestion. If we're all in this together, there's no reason for anyone to get hurt. Leah stepped out of the car, the rain soaking through her clothes as she approached the two of them. Her gaze shifted between Ethan and Sarah, her mind racing. The idea was absurd, reckless, and completely unthinkable. But as she looked into Ethan's eyes, she realized something. She wasn't ready to give him up. Not yet. Ethan, she said softly, her voice trembling, what do you want to do? He hesitated, his gaze flicking between the two women before a slow, knowing smile spread across his lips. If we're doing this, he said, his voice low and commanding, we're doing it my way. And as the rain poured down around them, sealing their dangerous pact, Leah couldn't help but wonder if this was the beginning of something far more thrilling and far more dangerous than she had ever imagined.